Hello everyone, good morning and welcome back to Sports Today. Now you know for a fact that this was a very action-packed weekend because we kept bringing you a lot of the things that were happening over, of course, both Saturday and Sunday, and of course, pretty eventful weekend. But even when you're catching up on some of that all-important sleep to ensure that you're ready for the new week to come, well, turns out a lot happens even in that time. So that's why we're joining you today so that we can talk about all of the things that may have happened whilst you were, of course, asleep, catching up with some rest, or just actually switching off from the world of sport. So without further ado, let's just get straight to it. First off, it's worth noting that there are numerous media reports doing the rounds that Mohammad Shami, who had been rested in the third test between India and Australia, will be making his comeback into the team for the fourth test match. Now, before you're wondering which of the pacers will make way for him, it does seem likely that it's going to be Mohammad Siraj, because the Indian team management has wanted to rotate and manage the workload of their bowlers, and Siraj will be playing a key part in the upcoming ODI series against Australia as well. So the thought process is to give him a little bit of rest because he's played 3 games on the trot, and truth be told, in the third test he didn't really bowl all of that much. Umesh was, of course, the main pace bowler India lent on, and his impressive performance is set to be rewarded with another test cap. Sticking, of course, to the world of cricket, and former Australia captain Ricky Ponting has had a couple of interesting things to say, not just about Virat Kohli's form, but also the state of the pitches that have been served up in India. So speaking to, of course, an ICC podcast, he said that look, the pitches in India have been something of a nightmare. So if I were me, I would not be judging anyone's average or form based on what's happening with these pitches, because, and what he said was, it's not the turn that's as much of a problem, but the uneven bounce. He's saying that turn most batsmen are able to judge, but if you're always worried about whether the ball is going to stay low or if it's going to bounce true, it will of course cause a problem. What he also said about Virat Kohli was that he said that look, I've said it before about Kohli, champion players always find a way. He said that I have no doubt that he's going to be coming back into even test form sooner rather than later. He's done it in white ball cricket and he's looked good during the series, but unfortunately, there's always been that one ball which has tended to get him out, and he has no, basically there's no doubts over the fact that according to Ponting, Kohli will soon be back at his best in red ball cricket as well. Sticking with, of course, cricket news, and we have an interesting update on Prithvi Shaw, because he spoke to a news channel recently and he actually opened up on how it felt to be back in the Indian team scheme of things. Remember, he was called up recently for a T20I series but didn't end up playing any of the matches, and when he was quizzed if he was disappointed to have not started any of the games, he said that no, I note for a fact that starting or getting a game here or there is not entirely in my hand, but it did feel nice to be back in the Indian team setup again when you could be involved with all of the players and of course be training with them. It just felt nice to be in the Indian setup again. I was grateful for that, and that for me right now is more important than actually solidifying a spot in the 11. He said that being in the playing 11, not something I can control, but I can keep performing well and be a part of the squad, and that's what's very important. It's a good approach, I would say, from Shaw, because as he says, whether or not he plays in the 11, not entirely in his control, but if he keeps scoring good runs in domestic and stays in and around the scheme of things of the national team, then things can potentially be happening for him sooner rather than later. Moving our focus now to the world of football, and Barcelona ended up getting a 1-0 win, which is down to the fact that they were, and this is despite the fact rather that they were down to 10 men later in the match, thanks to, of course, a Rafinha header, and they beat Valencia 1-0, and they now sit 9 points clear atop of the La Liga. If in case you're wondering why it is that they are now 9 points clear, it is down to the fact that, well, Real Madrid were held to a 0-0 draw by Real Betis. Now, it was a frustrating night for, of course, Real Madrid, because recently they had started, their form had been up and down, but they were actually still nowhere near out of contention as far as La Liga is concerned. And truth be told, they still are not. But if their form continues being this way, then it does seem very likely that Barcelona are going to win La Liga on a canter. And it does place a lot of doubts as to whether or not, Real Madrid can even get a trophy this season, because right now they're 1-0 down in the, after the first leg of the Copa del Rey. And whilst they are 5-2 up against Liverpool in the Champions League, the kind of form they're in, it doesn't seem likely that even if they make the quarterfinals that they're going to be making it too far. Then again, Real do have a history of defying odds, so what do I know? But as of now, things are not looking good for Los Blancos. Sticking to the world of football, and yes, Roma the Italian side, currently being managed by Jose Mourinho, have solidified their spot in the top 4 of Serie A, which means that they could very well be looking at a return to the Champions League. Now, granted, the lead isn't massive if you're looking at it, because they beat Juventus 1-0 and they're currently ahead of AS Roma on goal difference, that too by just 1. So Roma's goal difference is plus 11 and AC Milan's is plus 10. So it's very, very fine margins, but Roma currently in the driver's seat. They're in the top 4, and considering the fact that under the new ownership that they've had, and of course the management of Mourinho, you would be expecting that they, the amount of money that they've spent, would be expecting that they would be knocking on the door of the Champions League spots. Does seem likely that it could be happening at the end of the season, but it's been a very tight race for that top 4 spot in Italy. So let's wait and see how that race unfolds. Sticking, of course, to now moving on rather to another sport that had dominated headlines this weekend, Formula 1. The Bahrain Grand Prix season opener, not exactly a race to remember if you were looking for a good fight at the top, because Max Verstappen cantered to a victory, but the key interesting thing to remember was Fernando Alonso, who of course, 41 years old, joined a new team in Aston Martin. They gave him a very good car, and not only did he end up competing with and actually beating the Mercedes drivers for the top 3, he ended up getting onto the podium as well. And after the race, speaking, Max Verstappen had said that, look, if the Astons continue to develop the way they have and Alonso continues to drive, then I have no doubt in the fact that he may very well be competing for race wins this year as well. Now, both of them, of course, share a lot of mutual respect, so it's not surprising to see Verstappen say that, but it is also worth noting that the Astons look like the only team who could potentially have challenged Red Bull this in the opening race, because the Ferraris lost pace, the Mercedes too weren't looking anywhere close on race pace to the dominant Red Bulls. Whether that happens, well, that's something that remains to be seen. We'll end the news wrap with a nice little update, or a not so nice update depending on where it is you stand, on Novak Djokovic, who unfortunately has begun the process of withdrawing from the Indian Wells Masters, which will be taking place, of course, soon enough. And the reason he's actually had to withdraw is because American immigration laws and the visa laws currently don't allow for anyone who's not vaccinated against COVID-19 to be entering the country. Djokovic had actually tried applying for an exemption. It wasn't granted, so he has pulled out of Indian Wells and will in all likelihood not be playing the Miami Masters as well. So a bit of an unfortunate time recently for Djokovic, because again, he lost in the finals of the Dubai Masters and now won't be able to play much competitive tennis, at least in the US leg of things. But that is just the way the cookie crumbles. And that's it for us from this edition of the Morning Wrap. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you enjoy our work over here at Sports Today, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap that bell icon, leave us a comment, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and last but not least, don't forget to download the AajTak app. Thank you all once again for joining us. If you're already on the channel, go ahead, check out some other videos that we may have done, and stay tuned to us as we keep bringing you the latest happenings from the world of sport. For now though, from my side, goodbye.